Ilhan Omar launches a fiery attack on President Donald Trump, dismissing his warning about removing lawmakers who disrespect America as nothing but trash. But just moments later, Trump delivers a stunning response that leaves Omar blindsided and scrambling for cover. This video breaks down the full exchange, the political shockwaves, and why Trump's comeback is being talked about across the entire country. Viewers are left speechless as the confrontation escalates into one of the most intense moments of 2025. Thanksgiving morning in America is supposed to be peaceful, a moment when families sit around warm kitchens, children watch parade floats on TV, and the entire country takes a breath of gratitude. But on this morning, November 27th, 2025, something felt wrong in the air, something sharp, something unsettling. Inside homes across the nation, television suddenly lit up with breaking news banners and phones buzzed violently on kitchen tables. It was Ilhan Omar, angry, fiery, and louder than ever, launching a blistering attack on President Donald J. Trump, the 45th and now 47th President of the United States. Her words cut through the quiet morning like broken glass. "Trump's threat to kick me out of America is trash," she wrote on X. "He is a coward hiding behind lies." Families paused mid-prayer. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. People looked at one another confused, stunned, shaken. And deep inside the Oval Office, only hours after signing his brand new America First expulsion order, Donald Trump sat with the document still. On his desk, the gold seal shining under the morning sun. He had just issued one of the strongest immigration directives in modern American history, aimed at cleaning out fraud, corruption, and those who disrespect the very nation that gives them freedom. But the moment Omar's insult hit the internet, everything changed. Advisors rushed in, breathless, Secret Service agents stopped talking on their radios. Even the Marines at the West Wing entrance straightened up, sensing a storm forming. "Sir, she called you a coward," one aide whispered. Trump looked up slowly, his face calm, unusually calm, but there was something behind his eyes, something heavy, something quiet, like a storm, building before a tornado touches the ground. Outside, the sky over Washington, darkened with thick clouds and thunder rolled in the distance. It felt like the whole country was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for him. But before Trump responded, before the moment that would shake America, something heartbreaking happened behind the scenes. In Minnesota, young families who escaped war cried in frustration, terrified that their community would now be dragged into a political firestorm because of Omar's words. In Ohio, a soldier's widow watching the news whispered, "Why does she hate this country so much after everything we've lost?" In Texas, a little girl tugged on her father's sleeve and asked, "Daddy, why is she calling our president trash?" People weren't just shocked, they were hurt, deeply hurt, as if the morning had been stabbed with a knife. Meanwhile, Omar's team scrambled in panic, more panic than they expected, because the backlash was instant. Millions of Americans felt their Thanksgiving morning poisoned by her attack, and the anger online grew like wildfire. But Trump still hadn't spoken. Not a word, not a post, not a reaction. He simply leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said quietly, "She picked the wrong day and the wrong man." Then he stood up. America didn't know it yet, but the most shocking response of 2025 was only moments away. The air inside the West Wing felt heavier than usual, even though it was still. Thanksgiving morning, the building was no longer calm. Staff who'd been preparing to go home early for the holiday now stood frozen, watching the President of the United States walk slowly toward the private dining room. Not in anger, not in rush, but with a chilling, controlled intensity. Trump's silence alone terrified Washington, and America felt it. Phones vibrated nonstop as Omar's attack kept spreading like wildfire. Commentators jumped onto live streams. Despite being off duty, panelists scrambled into studios wearing sweaters and holiday clothes, their hair unprepared, makeup undone, because something told them this wasn't just another political argument. Something deeper was brewing. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, the shockwaves were brutal. A middle-aged teacher named Mrs. Howard sat alone at her table, shaking her head at Omar's post. She whispered to herself, voice breaking. This country gave her everything. Why would she say, "He's trash"? Why today? At that same moment across the country, in Florida, a retired firefighter named Mr. Dawson, who had nearly died on 9/11, watched the news replay of Omar's old "some people did something" line. This time on Thanksgiving, paired with her attack on the president, it cut him deeper than before. Tears fell down his face. She doesn't understand what this nation means. But he does, he said, pointing at the screen showing Trump. Even young kids felt it. A 10-year-old boy in Ohio tugged on his mom's shirt. Mom, why is she calling our president a coward? He saved people. He always fights. His mother had no answer. She simply hugged him tight. While America processed the emotional blow inside the White House, Trump stepped into the small dining room. Melania wasn't there. She was still preparing Thanksgiving dinner at Mar-a-Lago, but the room felt strangely peaceful. The president stood at the window overlooking the south lawn, the trees swaying slowly under the cloudy sky. That's when an aide entered carefully. Sir, the backlash is massive. Omar's tweet is everywhere. People are upset. Really upset. Trump didn't turn around. He kept staring outside, hands behind. His back like a general observing a battlefield. Then in a calm, low voice, he said, I warned them. I warned all of them. Respect America or don't expect safety from criticism. The aide swallowed. No one knew what was coming next. Back in Minnesota, Omar's staffers were falling apart. One assistant slammed her laptop shut, whispering, this is bad. This is really, really bad. She shouldn't have said that. Omar herself paced her office, chewing on her thumbnail, her voice shaking as she spoke into her phone. He hasn't responded yet. Not a single post, not one. No, Congresswoman, her senior advisor replied. He's silent. Silence, the most dangerous state of Donald J. Trump. Across America, people were waiting, not with excitement, but with a deep emotional weight pressing on their chests. Something was coming, something powerful. Then inside the White House, Trump finally turned away from the window, jaws set, eyes blazing with purpose. Prepare the cameras, he said. We're doing this live, and just like that, the storm began to move. Minutes. After Trump ordered the cameras to be prepared, the White House erupted into controlled chaos. Staff ran softly, but urgently through the halls. Technicians wheeled in lighting stands. Secret Service agents positioned themselves at every doorway. Even the official White House photographer, who had been preparing to leave early for the holiday, rushed back in with his equipment hanging half-zipped from his bag. No one fully understood what they were about to witness, only that it was important. Inside the press room, even the holiday skeleton crew felt a tremor in their chests as they received the message. The president is speaking. Live. Stand by. They knew what that meant. Every major network would cut into regular programming. Every American household would pause. The entire country would shift its attention to one man. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar's office descended into pure panic. Her communications director stared at the TV, jaw trembling as the breaking news announcement flashed. President Trump to address nation shortly. Omar snapped. Why would he respond live? He never does this unless she didn't finish. Her voice cracked. Her chest tightened. Not because she feared political consequences. She feared exposure. Her staffers exchanged silent looks, the kind that carried guilt, secrets, private worries they never said out loud. One whispered under his breath, he's going to talk about the fraudulent stuff. I know he is. He hinted at it before. Another corrected him. No, he's going to show something. He wouldn't go live unless he had something. Omar's eyes widened. For the first time in a long time, she looked genuinely afraid. Back in the White House, Trump stepped into the small stage area behind the podium. He wore no jacket, just a crisp white shirt and his signature red tie. The room fell silent as he adjusted the microphone. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. A producer mouthed silently, 3, 2, 1. And then America saw him. Families across the nation paused mid-meal. Kids put down their toys. Elderly grandparents leaned in closer. Homes, diners, airports, everything froze. Trump looked straight into the camera. No notes, no teleprompter, no hesitation. My fellow Americans, he began, his voice deep, slow, and steady. You deserve to know the truth about what happened this morning. In Minnesota, Omar stood in front of her television, unable to sit. Her fingers dug into her own palms. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. Trump continued, on this beautiful Thanksgiving day, when Americans should be celebrating their blessings, we were hit with hatred, lies, disrespect toward the very country that gave us everything. Millions nodded silently from their couches. Some wiped tears, some clenched their fists. Trump's tone darkened, not with anger, but with disappointment. That hurt more. And when Ilhan Omar called my warning trash, she wasn't attacking me. She was attacking the American people who want a country that respects their values. She was attacking you. Omar gasped softly. Her advisor whispered, Congresswoman, this is bad. Trump leaned forward, slightly, eyes like steel. And now I will show America something she never wanted you to see. Cameras zoomed in, viewers leaned closer. The real shock was seconds away. The air inside the White House briefing room grew so still that even the hum of the cameras seemed to fade. Millions of Americans leaned toward their screens, hearts pounding, breaths shaking. Whatever President Trump was about to reveal, it wasn't normal. It wasn't routine. Something in his eyes said, this moment was bigger than politics. Trump held a single folder, thin, cream-colored, unmarked. He placed it slowly on the podium. In Minnesota, Ilhan Omar felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself, whispering, no, he can't have that. He can't. Her senior advisor swallowed hard, terrified to speak. Meanwhile, in living rooms across the country, the emotional weight grew heavier. A family in South Carolina clutched hands tightly, their Thanksgiving meal untouched. A truck driver parked his rig on the highway shoulder just to watch. A nurse in New Jersey paused mid-shift, eyes glued to her phone as the president leaned closer to the mic. Trump's voice was soft, too soft. Americans, I want you to see something Ilhan Omar hoped you would never see. He opened the folder. The camera zoomed in, but the papers inside weren't shown yet, only Trump's solemn expression. He continued, for years, this country has welcomed people from all over the world with open arms. We give safety. We give opportunity. We give hope. But what do we ask in return? Very simple. Love America, respect America, support the country that saved your life. His voice wavered just slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, disappointment, hurt. And this morning, instead of gratitude, we got hate, we got insults. She called my warning trash. She called me a coward. But this isn't about me. This is about you, the American people. And I will not let anyone disrespect you. People across the nation felt their eyes sting. Some wiped away tears. Some held their chest overwhelmed. Trump then lifted one page from the folder. This is part of the reason I issued the America First expulsion order today. The page wasn't shown, only the backside filled with official seals and blacked out sections. But the way Trump held it made it clear this document meant something heavy, something real. Omar grabbed her hair with both hands, whispering, please don't. Her staff watched her crumble. Trump continued more forcefully now. I am not showing the full details. Not yet. But let me say this clearly. There have been extremely serious concerns about fraud, corruption, and dishonesty connected to Ilhan Omar's rise to power. Many people know it. Many people have been afraid to speak. A shocking silence followed. Then he said slowly, firmly, and today she decided to call America trash. On Thanksgiving Day, a grandmother in Arizona began to cry. A veteran in Iowa saluted through tears. Trump placed the document down and looked directly into the camera. You don't disrespect America and walk away pretending it never happened. Omar stumbled into her chair, breath gone, face pale. She had no idea what was coming next. For a long, breathless moment, the nation sat frozen, suspended between Trump's words and what was coming next. Even the reporters in the briefing room, though, many of them usually hostile, always ready to fire, back didn't dare interrupt. They felt something they rarely felt during a presidential address. Fear, not fear of Trump, but fear of what he might reveal. Omar sat stiffly in her chair, eyes burning into her TV screen, every breath, hitting her like a hammer. Her advisors circled like frightened birds, whispering, pacing, shaking their heads. One finally muttered, he's going to expose everything today. Thanksgiving of all days. But Omar wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was drifting into the darkest corners, memories of documents questioned, forms reviewed, interviews where she felt eyes inspecting her story, her past, her truth. Trump had always hinted at exposing her, but he had never gone this far. Not publicly, not live, not directly. Now he stood in front of millions. Trump took another page from the folder. This time he held it slightly higher, though still not showing its contents. Only the blurred outlines of text and government seals were visible. In Alabama, a grandmother put her hand to her chest and whispered through trembling lips, "Dear Lord," he found something. In Chicago, a retired Marine wiped away a tear. He's doing what nobody else had the courage to do. In Minnesota, Omar's voice cracked. What? What is he doing? Why is he doing this live? Why now? Her advisor answered. Softly, honestly, because you called him trash and the American people saw it. He's showing them the truth. Omar covered her face with both hands. For the first time all morning, she cried. Meanwhile, the White House press room was a battlefield of silent emotions. Some reporters leaned forward, shaking. Others held their breath, pens frozen above their notebooks. No one dared make a sound. Trump's voice returned, calm, steady, almost heartbreakingly controlled. For years, Americans asked for honesty, for transparency. They begged Washington to stop hiding corruption. They begged leaders to put America first. And today, when I simply reminded people that lawmakers must respect this country, Congresswoman Omar called it trash. He paused, letting the hurt settle. You could practically feel America's heart sink. But what she didn't expect, he continued, is that we were already reviewing serious concerns. Very serious concerns. Omar's sobbing grew louder. Trump placed the papers back into the folder and tapped it lightly with his hand. These documents and many more show patterns that the American people deserve to know. I won't release them today, not on Thanksgiving, because today is a day for families, for gratitude, for unity, but I will protect America from anyone who disrespects it. A wave of raw emotion washed over the country. A pastor in Texas bowed his head and quietly murmured, "God bless him." A young single mother in Pennsylvania cried softly, whispering, "He fights for us. He always fights for us." Trump looked straight into the lens, right into the heart of America. She called me a coward, but she's the one who's afraid of the truth. In Minnesota, Omar's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, hands trembling uncontrollably. The showdown had only just begun. Across the country, living rooms, kitchens, fire stations, hospital break rooms, every place where a TV or phone screen glowed fell into the same eerie silence. It was the silence of a nation, waiting for the next heartbeat. President Trump stood at the podium, still holding the closed folder that had shaken Ilhan Omar to her core. He didn't rush, he didn't shout, he let the moment breathe. And that made it even more powerful. Meanwhile, inside Omar's congressional office in Minnesota, the atmosphere had collapsed into raw panic. Her phone vibrated nonstop. Reporters calling, activists calling, donors calling, but she didn't pick up a single one. Her hands were shaking too badly. Turn it off. She snapped at her staff, pointing to the TV, but no one moved. No one dared. They too were watching Trump. Omar's assistant whispered, "Congresswoman, this is going viral. People are crying. People are angry. Angry at him or at me?" Omar asked, her voice cracking. The assistant said nothing. That told her everything. Back at the White House, Trump took a slow breath. The nation leaned closer. "I didn't come here today to attack anyone. It's Thanksgiving, a day for unity, a day for family, a day for grateful hearts." He paused, letting those words soak in. But when a lawmaker calls America trash, when a lawmaker calls you, the American people, cowards, I have a responsibility to stand up because you deserve respect. Families watching at home felt emotions swell in their chests. A little boy in Texas said quietly, "Mom, he sounds sad." His mom nodded, wiping away tears. "Because he loves this country more than anyone." Trump placed one hand on the folder. "What I hold in my hand are concerns that have been building for years. Serious concerns. Many people have been afraid to talk, but I am not afraid." The cameras flashed in the briefing room, not aggressively, but slowly, almost reverently, as if capturing history. Omar muttered to herself, "Please don't open it, please don't." Trump didn't open it, but he didn't need to. He simply tapped the folder again, letting the sound echo across the podium. "I won't ruin Thanksgiving for America by revealing details that will tear apart the lies we've been told for a long time. But I will make this clear. No one gets to insult America without consequences." In Iowa, a farmer stood up from his recliner and saluted the television. In New York, a young woman cried into her. Words cut through the nation like a blade. She called my warning trash. She said, "I'm a coward," but she's the one who spent the last hour making frantic phone calls because she fears the truth coming out. Every reporter in the room snapped their eyes up. This wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. Omar gasped loudly, audible, even over the muted TV as she staggered backward into her chair. Trump's voice lowered one final time. "When you disrespect America, you expose yourself." And with that, he stepped back from the podium, leaving the entire country shaking. The moment President Trump stepped back from the podium, the entire White House press room erupted, not in shouting, not in chaos, but in stunned, breathless disbelief. Reporters who usually pounced with aggressive questions simply stared at him like statues. Some even forgot to raise their hands. The camera continued streaming live, catching the deep emotion in Trump's eyes, the unmistakable sincerity of a man who believed he was protecting the country he loved more than his own life. He didn't storm out. He didn't smirk. He simply nodded once to the press and walked away. That quiet exit hit America harder than any fiery speech ever could. Within seconds, the nation began to crack emotionally. In Florida, a group of veterans gathered in a VFW hall. Men who had fought in Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam stood up one by one, tears filling their eyes. "He's doing what others were scared to do," one said, voice trembling. "He's fighting for the soul of this country." At a hospital in Michigan, nurses watched the replay on their phones during break. One wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her scrubs. Why would she call him trash on Thanksgiving? Why today of all days? A trucker sitting in his rig on the side of Interstate 80 put his head down on the steering wheel and cried softly, "He's right, nobody respects America anymore except him." Meanwhile, in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar's office had become a scene of absolute meltdown. The blinds were halfway closed. Phones rang relentlessly. Staffers stared at. Screens displaying thousands of furious comments all flooding in at once. The words were harsh, emotional, and deeply personal. Not political insults, but genuine heartbreak from Americans who felt betrayed. Omar stood in the center of the room, trembling. "What do I do?" she whispered, her voice almost gone. "What do I do now?" Her senior advisor swallowed hard. I don't know," he said. "You spent the last hour making frantic calls. People think you're hiding something." "I was calling my lawyers," Omar snapped. "That's what makes it worse," the advisor replied quietly. Omar pressed both hands to her forehead, pacing the room like someone drowning. Without water. It was just a tweet. She said he wasn't supposed to respond like that. Not live, not this big, but deep down, she knew the truth. She didn't just attack Trump. She attacked the American people he spoke for. Back at the White House, Trump returned to the Oval Office. The cameras were off now, the reporters silenced, but the tension didn't fade. It grew heavier as his staff approached him cautiously. "Sir," one aide said softly, "the reaction is overwhelming. People are saying they've never felt something like this before." Trump sat down slowly, resting his hands on the resolute desk. "Good," he said quietly, because it wasn't about politics. It was about respect. Outside, the Washington sky darkened, with heavy clouds as if reflecting the emotional storm sweeping the country. Across America, millions stared at their screens with wet eyes, shaking hands, and pounding hearts. The aftershock had only begun. The nation was still trembling from Trump's quiet but devastating address when the next shock wave hit. News networks, still broadcasting live, replayed the moment Trump tapped the unmarked folder again and again, each replay sending another ripple of emotion across America. Commentators spoke in hushed tones, almost afraid to raise their voices. Even anchors known for attacking Trump looked shaken, as if they themselves weren't sure what they had just witnessed. Meanwhile, the emotional wreckage spreading across the country grew heavier. In Pennsylvania, an elderly couple, both retired school teachers, held hands tightly on their living room sofa. The wife whispered, "He loves this country. He really loves it." Her husband nodded, tears welling up. "And she called him trash." "On Thanksgiving," he said, voice breaking. In small towns, big cities, rural farms, military bases, everywhere, Americans felt something shift deep inside them. It wasn't political. It wasn't left or right. It was personal. People felt the wound Omar's words had. Left on a day meant for gratitude. But Ilhan Omar, she was falling apart. Inside her Minnesota office, panic had turned into something raw, something terrifying. Her staff had stopped speaking. Every face was pale. Every phone on every desk buzzed with anger directed at her. And Omar? She couldn't stop pacing. "He turned the entire country against me," she said, running her fingers through her hair. "He twisted the narrative. He made me look like a monster." Her advisor didn't respond. He simply stared at his screen, reading comment after comment. "Maybe," Omar said shakily, "I should release a statement." "A statement?" the advisor snapped, finally losing his composure. "Congresswoman, millions of Americans just watched the president call out your disrespect. They watched him hold back documents instead of humiliating you on a holiday. They're crying. They're furious. They're emotional. A statement won't fix this." Omar stumbled back, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. "I didn't think he'd respond. Not like this." Her staff exchanged heavy, fearful looks. One finally said, "Congresswoman, you didn't just insult him. You insulted the country he represents." Those words hit Omar harder than anything Trump had said. Back at the White House, Trump sat quietly with two senior advisors. The mood wasn't triumphant. It wasn't celebratory. It was solemn. One advisor finally spoke. Sir, Americans are reacting very emotionally. They're saying your words today reminded them of what a president is supposed to be. Trump looked down at the folder on his desk, the same one he showed on camera. I didn't do it to hurt her, he said softly. I did it because Americans deserve pride in their country. Outside, the skies over Washington darkened even more, clouds drifting like heavy shadows across the city. In living rooms nationwide, families sat silently, tissues in hand, hearts hurting, but also relieved. Trump had defended them when they felt disrespected. And in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar pressed her palms over her eyes, tears spilling through her fingers. I've lost control, she whispered. I've completely lost control. But the emotional firestorm of Thanksgiving morning was far from finished. Across America, something rare was happening, something so emotional, so unexpected that even the networks didn't know how to frame it. Families who hadn't agreed on politics for years suddenly fell silent together, staring at the television with the same heavy, aching feeling in their chests. Every replay of Trump's calm, controlled response hit harder than the one before. A single father in Oklahoma felt tears slip down his cheek as he held his young daughter, who whispered, "Daddy." He talked like he cared about everyone. A group of veterans in Arizona, tough men with weathered hands and scars from battles most Americans would never understand, stood at attention in front of the TV, hats to their hearts. One whispered, voice breaking, "That's a commander." But as millions reacted with emotion, Ilhan Omar was drowning in a storm of her own making. Her office lights stayed dim, the blinds drawn as her staff begged reporters to leave the hallway. Still, cameras crowded against the glass like vultures. Reporters shouted questions she couldn't bear to hear. Congresswoman, do you regret your comments? Are you responding to the president's statement? Is it true? Your team is considering a retreat from the spotlight? Inside the room, Omar sank into a chair, her hands shaking. The weight of the morning was crushing her chest. She whispered to her assistant. He turned the whole country against me in less than an hour. Her assistant didn't deny it, couldn't deny it. Congresswoman, it's Thanksgiving. Families are watching him defend the country while you called him trash. People are emotional right now. They're taking this very personally. Omar's breathing grew heavier. The reality of the backlash was sinking deeper, cutting sharper. Back at the White House, the atmosphere was thick, not with celebration, but with the gravity of what had unfolded. Trump walked down the quiet hallway toward the residence, each step echoing like a reminder of the enormous responsibility resting on his shoulders. Two Secret Service agents followed at a respectful distance. One of them, a younger agent who had served since Trump's first term, couldn't hold back. "Sir, my dad called me today." He cried. He said, "Hearing you speak reminded him of why he served. I just wanted you to know." Trump paused, turned, and placed a hand on the agent's shoulder, a rare gesture. That caught the man off guard. "Tell him I said thank you," Trump said, softly. "Tell him America still needs men like him." The agent swallowed hard and nodded, fighting the emotion rising in his throat. Minutes later, Trump stepped onto the balcony overlooking the south lawn. The sun still hid behind heavy clouds, but the light that filtered through them felt strangely warm, like hope pushing against the gloom. Inside homes all across the country, Americans watched their screens with tears they didn't expect, hearts they didn't know could still break. And deep inside her office in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar whispered to no one, "How did this get so big so fast?" But the storm she feared most was still gathering strength. The clouds over Washington finally began to split, allowing a thin beam of sunlight to stretch across the south lawn, a quiet contrast to the emotional storm unfolding inside every American home. It was still Thanksgiving morning. Yet, the nation felt as if it had lived through a year's worth of emotion in just a few hours. Trump stood on the balcony, hands resting on the railing, looking out over the grounds with a level of calm only a man who had weathered every kind of storm could possess. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't triumphant. He looked reflective, heavy with the responsibility of defending a nation that had been wounded by disrespect. Behind him, an advisor stepped onto the balcony. "Sir, you should see this." Trump turned. The advisor handed him a tablet. On the screen was a live feed of thousands of Americans in parks and kitchens, in living rooms, standing together, not protesting, not shouting, but standing, hands over their hearts, replaying Trump's words. No cheering, no chanting, just quiet, powerful unity. Trump blinked slowly, overwhelmed by the sincerity of it all. Across the country, Something extraordinary was happening. A middle-aged mother in Detroit wiped her tears as she watched the replay. I didn't know he still had this in him, she whispered. I didn't know we still had this in us. In Texas, a Mexican-American truck driver paused at a rest stop, watching the clip on his phone. He nodded slowly, whispering, he defended us. He defended all of us. In Minnesota, even some of Ilhan Omar's own constituents felt a painful mix of embarrassment and clarity. She went too far this time, an elderly Somali-American man admitted softly. He spoke with strength. She spoke with anger, and in her office, Ilhan Omar sat alone at last. Her staff had stepped out, leaving her with the silence she had been avoiding. She watched the president's message again, this time without defensiveness, without bluster. Her hands trembled, her breath hitched. This is bad, she whispered, and for the first time all morning, she pressed her fingers against her eyes and let the tears fall. Back at the White House, Melania quietly approached her husband on the balcony. You handled it beautifully, she said softly. Trump didn't answer at first. The wind brushed through his hair as he looked out at the brightening sky. I didn't do it for me, he finally said. I did it. For America, this country deserves respect today. I just reminded them of that, Melania nodded, slipping her hand into his. Below them, a group of white House staff paused on the lawn, looking up at the president with quiet admiration, each one visibly moved by the events of the morning. For the first time in a long time, the nation, divided, hurting, exhausted, felt a moment of unity, a moment of clarity, a moment where the country remembered who Donald J. Trump was and why millions loved him. Thanksgiving morning 2025 would be remembered not for the attack, but for the response that healed something deep inside the American spirit. My friend, if this story touched your heart even a little, please do one thing for me right now. Don't scroll, don't click away, just take 1 second and hit because every helps this message reach more Americans who need to feel something real again. And if you felt the emotion, the suspense, the truth, then subscribe to join this family. We tell stories here that the world tries to hide, stories that make people think, cry, and see America in a new light. Drop a comment below telling me how this chapter made you feel. Your words keep this channel alive. And finally, join our membership today to unlock exclusive stories, behind-the-scenes secrets, and episodes you will never find anywhere else. This is your channel, our movement, our story. Let's grow it together.